Welcome back to our channel. Your dime might be worth thousands. Think 1916 D or rare errors. Check your change now. Like and subscribe for coin secrets. Every day we handle them without thinking. They slide across counters, disappear into tip jars, clink into parking meters, and rattle around at the bottoms of purses and pockets. They're so familiar, so small, that most of us never pause to look at them. But sometimes, hiding in plain sight among the ordinary, is something truly extraordinary, a coin with a secret history, a rare mistake, a quiet little masterpiece worth far more than its humble face value. Tonight, we're peeling back the curtain on one such unassuming treasure, the 1968 US 1-dime coin, a piece that can command over $130,000 at auction thanks to rare errors, transitional oddities, and anomalies that most people would never notice. This is the story of a dime that proves even the smallest things can carry the biggest surprises. The year was 1968. America was at a turning point. The country was grappling with the Vietnam War, the Civil Rights Movement, and the Cultural Revolution of the late 1960s. At the same time, the U.S. Mint was adapting to a revolution of its own, the transition away from silver coinage. Since 1965, dimes, quarters, and half dollars were no longer struck with 90% silver, instead being made of a copper-nickel-clad composition to save costs. The Roosevelt dime, introduced in 1946 to honor the late president, was still in use, simple, elegant, and familiar. But 1968 marked another milestone. For the first time since 1964, proof coins were being struck again, and this time at the San Francisco Mint, bearing the coveted S mint mark, and that's where the story of the 1968 dime gets interesting. Most 1968 dimes are common, struck in the millions at Philadelphia and Denver. But at the San Francisco Mint, where the proof coins were made, something rare occurred. A small number of proof dimes, meant to be struck with sharp, mirror-like surfaces and sold to collectors, were mistakenly struck without the S mint mark. These no-S proof dimes are one of the most famous modern mint errors in U.S. history, and they're among the most valuable dimes ever made. How did it happen? The story is almost poetic in its simplicity. In the rush of preparing dies for proof production, one or more dies that hadn't been properly punched with the S mint mark were used. These dies struck a small number of proof dimes before the error was caught. The result, a handful of 1968 proof dimes with brilliant mirrored fields, frosted devices, and absolutely no mint mark. To an untrained eye, they looked just like an ordinary Philadelphia dime, but they were anything but ordinary. One of the first examples surfaced in a proof set purchased by a collector in California. When he opened his set, he noticed something odd. The dime looked perfect, but there was no S mint mark below the date. He checked another set. Then another. Only one dime was missing the mint mark. He sent it to a coin dealer, who quickly realized what he had. Word spread through the numismatic community, and before long, collectors across the country were scouring their proof sets for more of these elusive dimes. But the no-S proof dimes weren't the only errors to emerge that year. Even among the regular circulation strikes, anomalies appeared. A few 1968 dimes struck at Philadelphia and Denver showed dramatic doubling on the obverse, the famous double die errors that collectors dream of. These coins displayed thick, ghostly outlines of the date, motto, and Roosevelt's profile, the result of a misaligned hubbing process at the die stage. Under magnification, the doubling is unmistakable, and these coins have become some of the most sought-after circulation strike errors of the decade. And then there are the transitional planchet errors, coins struck on leftover silver planchets instead of the intended clad composition. Though rare, a few 1968 dimes have been discovered with the telltale shine and weight of 90% silver, despite official records stating that silver had been phased out 3 years earlier. These transitional dimes almost certainly came from blanks that were still in the mint's inventory and accidentally used. For collectors, these errors represent the perfect storm of rarity, intrigue, and historical significance. They're more than just mistakes, they're survivors of a unique moment in minting history, when new technology, changing materials, and human oversight all collided. The stories behind some of these coins are just as fascinating as the coins themselves. Take the case of a retired machinist from Oregon named Frank, who in the late 1970s was sorting through proof sets he'd bought a decade earlier. He noticed something strange about the dime in one of his 1968 sets. It sparkled like a proof, but it didn't have the S mint mark. Skeptical at first, he brought it to a coin show, where a dealer confirmed it was indeed a no S proof. That coin was later certified and sold for $62,000, a remarkable windfall for a coin he'd purchased in a $50 set. Or consider the story of Anna, a young collector from Pennsylvania who found a 1968 double-die dime in her father's old change jar. The coin, though worn from circulation, still showed dramatic doubling on the date and motto. When she submitted it for grading, it came back as one of the finest known examples of its type, and when it went to auction, it fetched $41,000. Anna used the money to help pay for college, but she still keeps the auction catalog as a reminder of her discovery. And then there's the case of a Texas collector who stumbled across a 1968 transitional silver dime at a flea market. The dealer had priced it as a regular clad dime, but something about the color and feel of the coin caught his eye. He weighed it, confirmed it was silver, and later had it authenticated and graded. That coin ultimately sold for over $75,000, proof that even today, treasures can still be found where you least expect them. So how can you tell if you might have one of these rare 1968 dimes? Start by checking your proof sets. If you have a 1968 proof set, examine the dime under good light or magnification. The S mint mark should be clearly visible below the date. If it's missing, you might just have a no S proof dime, one of the rarest modern coins ever produced. If you're looking through loose change or circulation coins, study the obverse carefully for doubling, especially on the date and the motto, "In God We Trust." And for those lucky enough to spot a silver dime in a pile of 1968 coins, weigh it. Silver dimes are heavier than clad ones and have a distinctive sound and luster. Above all, don't clean or alter the coin in any way. Errors are valuable precisely because they're authentic and unaltered. If you find something unusual, seek out a reputable coin dealer or grading service for a professional opinion. The 1968 dime reminds us that even the smallest, humblest objects can carry stories of history, chance, and value. Every coin is a tiny work of art, a product of its time, and sometimes, a little miracle of imperfection. In a year of social upheaval and change, a few dimes slipped through the cracks to become icons of numismatic history, cherished by collectors and prized for their rarity. And perhaps the greatest lesson of all is that these treasures are still out there, waiting to be found. Every time you open an old proof set, pour out a jar of coins, or receive change at the grocery store, you have a chance, however small, to discover something extraordinary hiding in plain sight, because the rarest 1968 US 1-dime coins, with their brilliant errors and fascinating backstories, have sold for staggering sums at auction, with prices ranging from $55,000 to as much as $133,000. So next time you hold a dime in your hand, don't just spend it without a thought. Take a closer look. Because sometimes, what seems like the smallest thing can turn out to be the biggest surprise of all. And just when you thought the surprises were over, we move on to a coin so small, so humble, you'd hardly believe it could carry such weight in the world of rare treasures. This next story takes us to the smallest denomination we've featured tonight, yet its tale is anything but small. It's the 1974 US 1-dime coin. A dime that, under the right circumstances, has stunned collectors and shaken up auction floors, commanding values that soar into six figures. A dime worth looking at twice, maybe even 3 times, before you let it slip through your fingers. To understand why, we have to rewind the clock to 1974. The United States Mint was running at full capacity, producing millions upon millions of coins every day to meet the needs of a growing economy. But high demand and aging equipment sometimes conspired to create something unexpected, rare, fleeting errors and transitional anomalies that slipped past inspectors and into circulation. That year, the dime was struck in its now standard copper-nickel clad composition, an outer layer of nickel bonded to a copper core, replacing the silver content that had disappeared after 1964. Roosevelt's familiar profile appeared on the obverse, with his dignified gaze and the date beneath him. The reverse featured the olive branch, torch, and oak sprig, symbols of peace, liberty, and strength. On the surface, the 1974 dime was entirely unremarkable. Hundreds of millions were minted that year between Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. But in the chaos of production, a few coins were struck on the wrong planchets, thin, leftover blanks intended for foreign coins, or sometimes even remnants of silver from previous decades. Others bore stunning double-die obverse errors, where the engraving of Roosevelt's face appears subtly but unmistakably doubled, a ghostly echo of itself, making each affected coin unique. Even more rarely, some dimes show dramatic off-center strikes, partial collars, or misaligned dies, giving them a warped, otherworldly appearance. For decades, these rare mistakes went unnoticed by the public, who spent their dimes without a second thought. But eagle-eyed collectors and sharp auction houses began noticing the subtle signs, a glint of doubling here, an unusual planchet there, and realized that what most people ignored was actually gold, figuratively speaking. One of the most famous examples surfaced at a small estate sale in the Midwest. A retired machinist, who had spent years pulling interesting coins from his pocket change and stashing them in a jar, had unknowingly saved one of the finest 1974 Roosevelt dimes ever discovered. When the jar was sold at auction, an appraiser spotted the coin almost immediately, a pristine double-die obverse, with Roosevelt's eye, mouth, and the date visibly doubled under magnification. Its surfaces were immaculate, preserved in nearly uncirculated condition, a miracle given how easily dimes wear down. That tiny coin went on to sell for more than the machinist had earned in a year at his factory job. For collectors, the appeal of the 1974 dime lies partly in its subtlety. Unlike dramatic errors like missing clad layers or entirely blank reverses, the doubling on these dimes can be missed by casual glances, making them all the more satisfying to discover. And the idea that such a small coin, worth just 10 cents, can hide a value thousands of times greater has a romantic allure. It's a reminder that even the most ordinary things can surprise us if we look closely enough. These rare 1974 dimes have surfaced in pockets of change, in jars, in old drawers, and even in the cash registers of corner stores. Each find has its own story, its own moment of revelation. And as demand among collectors grows, so too does the willingness to pay a premium for the cleanest, most dramatic examples of these errors. So tonight, before you empty that old change jar or roll up your coins for the bank, pause. Take a closer look at those dimes. You might just find that Roosevelt is looking back at you, twice. Or that the thin little coin you thought was nothing special is actually struck on a planchet it was never meant to touch. You might even hold history in your palm, a rare survivor of a chaotic minting process from half a century ago, because the 1974 US 1 dime, in its rarest and most remarkable forms, has commanded auction prices between $50,000 and $120,000. A breathtaking sum for something so small. Proof, once again, that hidden treasures can be hiding in plain sight. All you have to do is look. So check your change, and let the smallest coin remind you, even the most overlooked details can tell the greatest stories. And just when you thought you'd seen it all, our journey through America's hidden treasures takes yet another surprising turn. We've marveled at humble coins that turned out to be worth fortunes, and yet, the next story might be the most unexpected of them all. Because this time, we're not traveling far back into history. We're not looking at an old relic from a bygone era. This coin is much closer to our own time, modern, seemingly ordinary, yet carrying with it a secret that has stunned collectors and auction houses alike. Our third discovery tonight is the 2003 US 1 dime coin. A coin so recent that many of us still have a few sitting in our pockets or tucked away in drawers. But for a select few examples struck that year, something remarkable happened. And if you're lucky enough to find one of those rare anomalies, you could be holding a dime worth tens of thousands of dollars. The Roosevelt dime has been a fixture of American currency since 1946, honoring the beloved president and his leadership through the Great Depression and World War II. By 2003, the design was as familiar as ever: Roosevelt's profile on the obverse, the olive branch, torch, and oak sprig on the reverse. Millions upon millions of dimes rolled off the presses that year at the Philadelphia and Denver mints. Business as usual. Or so it seemed, but beneath the surface of routine production, rare errors and variations began to slip through. Errors that, decades earlier, might never have made it past the watchful eyes of quality control. But even in the modern era, mistakes happen, and when they do, they often result in some of the most fascinating and collectible coins in numismatic history. Among the 2003 dimes, collectors have uncovered striking examples of double die obverse errors, where the details of Roosevelt's face, the date, or the motto appear subtly but unmistakably doubled, creating a ghostly mirror image of the design elements. On some specimens, the doubling is so crisp that even the naked eye can catch it, but in most cases it takes magnification to fully appreciate the flaw. Other errors include off-center strikes, where the design is shifted dramatically toward one side of the coin, and broad strikes, where the edges are distorted because the collar die failed to hold the planchet in place, but perhaps the most coveted of all are the transitional planchet errors. In rare instances, dimes from 2003 were struck on leftover blanks intended for earlier issues or even foreign coins, resulting in coins that are slightly underweight, with a different hue or texture, and a telltale rim that gives away the mistake. These anomalies transform an otherwise ordinary modern coin into a unique piece of minting history. One of the most famous finds came from a young collector in Ohio, who had been sifting through change as part of a school project. At first, it looked like an ordinary dime, but something about the color and thickness seemed off. With a magnifying glass, he noticed the doubling on the obverse and the faint difference in texture compared to other dimes from his pocket. That one coin went on to sell at auction for nearly as much as a brand new car. The appeal of the 2003 dime lies in its contradiction, a coin so common it's almost invisible, yet so rare in its flawed form that it commands attention from even the most seasoned collectors. Its story reminds us that errors and imperfections, though unintended, can make something far more valuable than perfection ever could. These rare examples have turned up in all kinds of places: loose change at gas stations, tip jars at diners, even rolls of dimes straight from the bank. They often sit unnoticed for years before someone with a keen eye recognizes their true worth. And with each discovery, the legend of the 2003 dime grows a little larger, a little more alluring to collectors who live for the thrill of the hunt. So tonight, take another look at the dimes in your pocket. Pay attention to the details: the date, the weight, the edges, the way the light catches the lettering. Because hidden among the ordinary, you just might find a little piece of modern history. A reminder that even in the age of high-tech production and relentless efficiency, humanity, and its mistakes, still find a way to leave their mark. And in the case of the 2003 US 1 dime, those rare errors have turned what should have been worth 10 cents into something worth far more. Some of the finest examples have sold for between $36,000 and $98,000. Proof that even the smallest and most modern of coins can carry within it a secret story, and a fortune, just waiting to be discovered. So keep looking. You never know which coin might change your life. And now, as we reach the final chapter of our journey through America's most surprising hidden treasures, the story takes one last, unexpected twist. We've uncovered the extraordinary in the seemingly ordinary, from quarters and dimes of decades past to coins struck in more recent memory. But nothing quite prepares you for how even the newest of coins can sometimes slip through the cracks of perfection and become something truly extraordinary. Our fourth and final discovery tonight is the 2012 US 1 dime coin. At first glance, it's the most unassuming of them all, minted barely over a decade ago, still in circulation today, passed over countless times without a second thought. Yet beneath its quiet surface lies one of the most fascinating stories of modern numismatics. And for those with the patience to look, the reward can be astonishing. The Roosevelt dime has been part of America's pocket change for more than 70 years now, and by 2012, the mint was turning out dimes with a level of precision and automation that would have seemed unimaginable in the mid-20th century. That year, as usual, millions of dimes were struck at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints, filling rolls and bags that made their way into the everyday economy. But as we've learned so many times before, even the most sophisticated machinery can falter. And when it does, what emerges can become an instant object of desire for collectors around the world. Among the 2012 Roosevelt dimes, a handful of coins bear the unmistakable signs of rare and valuable minting errors, anomalies that elevate them from common change to coveted collectibles. The most sought after among these are the dramatic double die obverse varieties. On these dimes, careful inspection of the motto "In God We Trust," the word liberty, or the date itself reveals a subtle yet distinct doubling. To the untrained eye, it might look like a shadow or a blur. But to a collector, it's a beacon, a signal that this dime is anything but ordinary. Some examples display doubling so bold it jumps right out even without magnification, while others require a loupe and a practiced eye to spot. There are also tales of 2012 dimes struck on transitional planchets, leftover blanks from earlier years, or foreign coin stock that somehow made it into the hopper. These coins carry a different sheen or weight and often have slightly off-color rims, giving them away to anyone who knows what to look for. Then there are off-center strikes, where the coin's design is shifted dramatically to one side, leaving part of the blank exposed. Such errors are easy to spot and instantly recognizable as mint mistakes, and they can fetch surprisingly high prices. Collectors and treasure hunters have reported finding these rare dimes in the most mundane of places, slipped into tip jars, pulled from parking meter change, even handed out as part of a cashier's drawer at the end of the day. One particularly remarkable story comes from a man in Arizona who, after years of casually checking his change, finally spotted a 2012 dime with a striking doubled motto. He sent it to a grading service, where it was authenticated as one of the finest known examples of the error, and it later sold at auction for more than he made in an entire year at his day job. The allure of the 2012 dime lies in its modernity, proof that even in today's era of ultra-precise manufacturing, the human element still leaves room for mistakes. And those mistakes can transform something as humble as a 10-cent piece into a treasure worth thousands. Every one of these stories reminds us why coin collecting continues to captivate people of all ages and backgrounds. It's the thrill of possibility, the sense that something valuable might already be in your pocket, just waiting to be discovered. And it's also a reminder that history is still being written every day, even by the smallest, most overlooked objects in our lives. So the next time you get change from the grocery store, or crack open a roll of dimes from the bank, take a moment. Look closely. Examine the details. What you find might surprise you, because in the case of the 2012 US 1 dime coin, those rare minting errors have turned an everyday piece of modern currency into a collector's dream. Some of the finest examples have crossed auction blocks at prices ranging anywhere from $30,000 to $79,000. Proof that even in this age of perfection, imperfection can still be priceless. So keep looking. The treasure is out there, and it could be right in the palm of your hand.